we won't be here, or likely won't be here, obviously, in 10 years. And 10 years down the line, when we're making these new redistricting lines and a new congressional caucuses are made, we've set the precedent that you can place a senator in a congressional caucus that doesn't represent that constituency. You could set the precedent that we could move people in our second congressional district caucus, or the way that you currently see each caucus, people could be put in there that don't represent constituents in there. That's the reason why I'm worried. Has nothing to do with R versus D, because what I'm proposing is actually having Bostman, because he represents people in the district. I worry about the integrity of that aspect of this process, which is whether or not we set to some extent, a precedent that can be really negative for the future of how we do our leadership elections within caucuses if you start putting people in caucuses that don't represent people in those districts anymore. Because as you know, our caucuses elect our committee on committees. They elect our individuals for representation for executive board. Those committee on committees are making decisions on how we put people on the committee structure. And when I first came to the body and I was asking my 4 representatives in my committee on committees, I asked them and was making the case that as somebody that represents part of the district, I wanted to be on a specific committee, and they were part of my voice in doing that. And it was great because they were part of my voice because I represent constituents within the same congressional district that they do. If we 10 years from now start to have these caucuses with people that are no longer in them, it could change the way that these are taken and planned for. And I just want to make sure that we're not setting that precedent. So I'm not trying to filibuster it. I'm using my 3 times. And I really do hope that we can find something that we do here, and we'll commit to talk to Senator Hughes again, and hopefully he'll work with me on an amendment that will be fairly simple, so that we have every person in the congressional district, in the caucus, has constituents that are in that congressional district, so that we're setting a strong precedent for the future of how we do this. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Varg. Erdman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. I was going to be really brief and say I don't care, because I really don't care. But what I will say is Senator Hughes said the clerk's office drew the map. And the clerk's office has been here for a long time. So I think whatever Patrick and his group have concluded we should have is what I agree with. And I'll give you a heads up. I'm thinking about a motion to sine die, because we have been wasting time like I've never seen before. So we just put ourselves out of our misery and go home. So tomorrow, after we do the veto overrides, there may not be anything that I think is significant enough, except for maybe Senator Brewer's bill, to stick around till next week. So let's vote on this and move on. We've argued about this 3 or 4 times. Enough is enough. It's time to vote.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator McAllister, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And once again, I agree with Senator Erdman. There is looking at this map, and the clerk's office drew it, and there's no animus in these maps. But there ought to be a correlation between the congressional map, looking at the counties, and also the map that we use for our legislative districts for our caucus organizations. There should be similarity. When we had the map before, there was a rough correlation, but not now. And so, between general and select, we need to deal with this and figure out if there's a better way to do it. When you look at the various legislative districts and where they fit in the congressional districts, maybe we need to look at the composition or the population of each legislative district and where the population is in that legislative district. But there ought to be a better way of doing it, because right now it's kind of the swag method. And I think we better figure a better protocol to determine where those legislative districts should be organized in our legislative caucuses. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McCollister. Senator Arch, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, since everybody's talking about carving me up, I'm feeling a little bit like turkey at Thanksgiving. But we do understand that our legislative districts do not tie to the congressional district. So yes, there's a piece of me there. But if you take a hard look and you look at the city streets and all of that for Congressional District 1, where now 14 has piece in there, you'll see that Senator Day is also in Congressional District 1. I mean, it's not clean. You can't base it on congressional districts. And so I will tell you that while Congressional District 1 has a good piece of my district, my legislative district, I've got a lot of folks that identify with the metropolitan area. So with that, I'll yield the balance of my time to Senator Hughes.
Senator Hughes, you are yielded 356.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Arch. I do appreciate it. Senator Arch made the point extremely well. Congressional district boundaries have nothing to do with legislative district boundaries. Absolutely nothing. And my good friend, my roommate, Senator Vargas, I understand why he is very passionate about congressional boundaries. He's running for Congress, and good for him. I appreciate him putting himself out there, as I do Senator Pansing Brooks and Senator Flood, who are running for Congress. I appreciate that. But congressional lines have nothing to do with this. If you look at previous maps, there were districts that were split between congressional districts before. Senator Albright is a great example of that in the previous map. We have to draw a line somewhere. And congressional districts really have nothing to do with what we're trying to do to establish our caucuses. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hughes and Senator Arch. Senator Matt Hansen, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I just have to disagree with basically everything that's just been said. We've talked about these being congressional district caucuses the whole time. They've always been based in the congressional districts. They've not been based in metropolitan areas. And I'm not going to let people just kind of make up stuff like that in the microphone. And if I have to talk some more, I will. Colleagues, we talk about we want to have the metropolitan area of Omaha together, not the congressional district. That's what we really want. All of Bellevue is in one district and isn't in the same district as Senator Arch's district. I mean, 315, what? Like, we took the rural part of Sarpy County, but left out the urban parts of Sarpy County. It's like the argument that was just said like 30 seconds ago doesn't make sense. It doesn't even fit with the map we're looking at. Like, come on. I don't think this 686 is the end of the world. Like, it's fine. It changes something. I'm not going to vote for it. But to say that this has nothing to do with congressional districts, has never had, is just ignorant of everything that we've done up through my 8 years here. And every time we've referenced it, talked about it, the way the map currently looks, if it's metropolitan areas, why are 30 and 32, which represent now a chunk of Lincoln, in the 3rd congressional district? That's very clearly the Lincoln metropolitan area. Those districts, and you all know how I felt about the Lincoln map, those districts really do belong in Lincoln. Like, if we want to start talking about, ignore congressional districts and we're just going to go metropolitan areas, we can start talking about that, but I'm going to want to move 30 and 32 around because people who live in South Lincoln, people who go to Standing Bear High School, shouldn't have a senator who's caucusing in the same place as the Panhandle. unless we're talking about population centers and congressional districts, because that's the only way that split works. Can't carve up Omaha however you like and say it's tradition or it's just where people live, it's just the balance, and then carve up Lincoln and say, oh, all of South Lincoln's got to be in a different caucus because some tradition that's not congressional districts. Like there is a pretty clear path we can go forward. Like I said, I can live with 686. I can, I don't know where, I'm not going to vote for it, but I don't have the strongest opposition to it. But when we get up and we say these things that are like, why on earth would we ever consider these congressional district caucuses? Maybe all of our legislative tradition and history, maybe just everything we've ever referred to them, maybe just looking at the plain map. So I would strongly encourage us to vote in Senator Kavanaugh's amendment. I think it makes sense in the sense that at least when you do that, everybody, aside from I think one senator, will at least live in the congressional district their caucus is. It solves several things. But if we're going to start talking about we want the Omaha metropolitan area caucus, like I could start talking about wanting the Lincoln metropolitan area caucus too, and I might take 30 and 32 and keep 24, and we'll have to decide in some others where exactly the split is. I mean, maybe we could do something else. But we've had a tradition. It's been plain. I just don't even know how to address the notion that they somehow haven't been tied to congressional districts this whole time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Matt Hansen. Senator Panzine Brooks, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Of course, we're on exec, and we did vote 4-5 on that, and did not support it. I've now talked to the clerk, and I've talked to counsel for exec, and I feel more comfortable about what happened and what's going on. So I will be moving it forward tonight, and just wanted to let you know that since I brought up some concerns I was worried about. So I feel like the process has been handled as well as it can in a messy system, and I will be voting for this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Panzine Brooks. Seeing no one in the queue, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to close on AM 1681.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. I appreciate the engagement on this issue. I know that this isn't a perfect solution, but I wanted to get the conversation going. If this doesn't get adopted, I think that we should still keep the conversation going on select, but I hope you will vote green. And if you don't, maybe just gently not adopt the amendment. You don't have to defeat it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 1681 to LB 686. All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish? Record, Mr. Clerk.
Ten ayes, 25 nays on the adoption of the amendment, Mr. President.
The amendment is not adopted. Returning to debate. See no one in the queue. Senator Hughes, you're recognized to close on LB 868. Senator Hughes waives closing. Members, the question is the advancement of LB 686 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have all voted that wish? Record, Mr. Clerk.
35 ayes, 3 nays on the advancement of the bill.
LB 686 is advanced. Returning to general file, speaker priority bills, LB 1130.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 1130 by Senator Morfeld. It's a bill for enacting the Nebraska Statewide Workforce and Education Reporting System Act to require memorandum of understanding regarding data sharing, provide duties for the statewide workforce and education reporting system, Department of Labor, Department of Motor Vehicles, Department of Health and Human Service, Department of Revenue, require reports, require confidentiality. Bill was introduced on January 19th, was referred to the Business and Labor Committee, placed on general file with committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Morfeld, you're recognized to open on LB 1130.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. We're going to have a committee amendment that's going to be coming up here in a minute, I hope anyway. That's AM 2206, which completely guts the bill and essentially turns it into a reporting bill. So AM 2206 would strike the original language and insert an ongoing reporting requirement for the Nebraska statewide workforce and education reporting system that would include their annual research and analysis, additional data NSERS may need in the future to conduct research, and other needs from NSERS to ensure that its success in a collaborative P through 16 initiative. AM 2206 would have no fiscal impact and would ensure that both the governor and the legislature are regularly updated on the analysis done by NSERS per their establishment in 2020 through LB 1160. AM 2206 addresses all of the concerns brought forward at the hearing by both state agencies and the business community by removing the mandated MOUs and instead begins the annual reporting process of what NSERS may need in terms of data sharing and partnerships into the future. I want to thank my good friend and colleague, Senator Mike Hilgers, for making this a speaker priority, and I urge your adoption of the bill and particularly the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Morfeld. As the clerk stated, there are amendments from the Business and Labor Committee. Senator Ben Hansen, you are recognized to open on the committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Morfield summed it up pretty good about what the amendment entails. AM 2206 would strike the green copy language in LB 1130 and replace it with a language that requires ongoing annual reporting for the Nebraska statewide workforce and education reporting system, or NSERS. AM 2206 eliminates the fiscal impact of the bill and will ensure that both the governor and legislature are regularly updated on the analysis done by NSERS per its establishment in 2020 through LB 1160. AM 2206 also addresses all the concerns brought forward at the hearing by both state agencies and the business community by removing the mandated data sharing, and instead begins an annual reporting process of what NSERS may need in terms of data sharing and data partnerships. As amended with AM 2206, LB 1130 was voted out of committee unanimously, and I would urge the body to adopt AM 2206 and advance LB 1130. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Ben Hansen. Debate is now open. Seeing no one in the queue, Senator Ben Hansen, you're recognized to close. Senator Ben Hansen waives closing. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 2206 to LB 1130. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
33 yeas, 1 nay on the adoption of committee amendments.
The amendment is adopted. Returning to debate. Seeing no one wishing to speak, Senator Morfeld, you're recognized to close on LB 1130. Senator Morfeld waives closing. Members, the question is the advancement of LB 1130 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. Have all voted that wish? Record, Mr. Clerk.
33 yeas, 1 nay on the motion to advance the bill.
LB 1130 is advanced. Returning to the speaker's queue. LB 1130A.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 1130A offered by Senator Morfeld It's a bill for calculating appropriations to carry out the provisions of Legislative Bill 1130.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Morfeld, you're recognized to open on LB 1130A.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, as I just noted, the committee amendment that we just adopted actually zeroes out any fiscal impact. That being said, after talking to the clerk's office, we want to advance this A bill just in case to make sure that we actually don't need it, which again, on select file, it should just be completely fiscally neutral after that amendment. So I just ask that you advance the A bill for now, but it will be fiscally neutral. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Morfeld. Debate is now open. Seeing no one in the queue, Senator Morfeld, you are recognized to close on LB 1130A. Senator Morfeld waives closing. Members, the question is the advancement of LB 1130A to ENR initial. All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted that wish to? Record, Mr. Clerk.
33 yeas, 2 nays on the motion to advance the bill.
LB 1130A advances. Returning to the agenda, committee priority bills, LB 1150.
Legislative Bill 1150, offered by the Performance Audit Committee. It's a bill for enacting the Nebraska Act, to amend Section 776827, change provision relating to the contents of application agreements, repeal original sections. Bill was introduced on January 19th, referred to the Revenue Committee. The Revenue Committee reports the bill to general file with committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Geist, you are recognized to open on LB 1150.
Thank you, Mr. President. LB 1150 is actually a combination bill for Performance Audit Committee and the Revenue Committee. It is a bill that will provide the legislature with additional information necessary for the Legislative Audit Office to improve performance audits of the Imagine Act and meet their statutory requirements for auditing business incentive programs. This is one of the Performance Audit Committee's 2 priority bills. As you may know, the legislature has been evaluating our economic development tax incentives since 2015. These evaluations and many of the specific metrics that are measured are required by statute. Because the Imagine Act is now a new program that replaced Nebraska's former flagship tax incentive, the Performance Audit Committee took this opportunity to examine whether the data being collected was sufficient to generate high-quality reports that meet the expectations of the legislature. The Imagine Act does collect more data than is relevant to the evaluations than the Advantage Act did. This additional data will allow the Audit Office to better examine metrics related to new employees. This bill reflects a few of the recommendations from the Audit Office memo on the Imagine Act data that was released in January. The Legislative Performance Audit Committee worked with the State Chamber and agreed to remove a couple of the items from the green copy. The committee will look at these items over the interim and work with the State Chamber and the audit agency to be sure we're getting everything we need. The remaining provisions will generate data that will help inform the legislature about the Imagine Act's impact on property taxes, workforce training activities, and employee recruitment. I urge you to vote green on LB 150, and for the additional information that's in this bill, I will turn the rest of my time over to Senator Linehan.
Thank you, Senator Geist. As the clerk stated, there are amendments from the Revenue Committee. Senator Linehan, as chairman of the committee, you're recognized to open on the committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to go directly to the introduction of the committee amendment since it becomes the bill. First, I would like to thank the Performance Audit Committee and Senator Geist in particular for working with the Revenue Committee on the amendments to the original bill. LB 1150 was chosen as a priority bill for the performance audit. The intent of the green copy of the bill was to add specific metrics to the performance audit scope for the Imagine Nebraska Act. We have amended in several bills which either address the Imagine Act directly or specific provisions of our tax incentive programs. LB 1150 incorporates the provisions of LB 502 as amended with AM 1514, Senator Flood's bill, LB 817 as amended by AM 1727, which was my bill, LB 985, Senator Coulterman's bill, and LB 1094, another of Senator Flood's bills. I will go through the amendment by section and indicate which provisions are included in that section. LB 817 was brought to me by the Department of Revenue. It makes numerous cleanup changes to the Imagine Act. Many of these changes are to ensure that the department's reporting is all done on the fiscal year accrual basis in accordance with the Government Accounting Standards Board. Section 1, cleanup provisions to allow the department to obtain Social Security numbers for employees. Section 2 is also cleanup language and changes the joint hearing of the Revenue and Appropriations Committees on tax incentives to every even-numbered year. Section 3 is very similar to Section 2. Section 4 is cleanup language. Section 5, 6, and 7 contain the provisions of LB 502 as amended. This allows taxpayers with an active agreement under the Nebraska Advantage Act to apply for direct pay permit. Direct pay permits allows taxpayers to make purchases tax-free rather than filing a refund claim later. Any taxable purchases are reported by the taxpayer. Direct pay permits are allowed under the Imagine Act, but not under the Advantage Act. Those taxpayers that have either a large data center project under Tier 2 or sequential project under Tier 5 following a Tier 2 large data center project are the only ones that may apply for the direct pay permit. Qualified taxpayers must apply within 60 days of the effective date of this bill, and they must comply with all the data disclosure requirements under the Imagine Act. The remainder of Section 7 is simply renumbering. Section 8 is also simply renumbering. Section 9 is cleanup language relative to the previous section. Section 9 repeals the requirements for an annual report on tax incentives from the department and the even-numbered year joint hearing. Section 11 references previous section. It requires the department to notify any city in which the project is located that the taxpayer has elected a direct pay permit within 30 days of such an election. Section 12 and 13 are cleanup language. Section 14 contains the provisions of LB 985. This clarifies the base year under the Imagine Act in light of COVID. If the taxpayer increased the number of equivalent employees in 20 or 21 in response to COVID, then the base year shall be 2019 for purposes of calculating the number of equivalent employees. Section 15 is cleanup language clarifying the improvements to the real property qualify as an investment even if the entire improvement is not yet completed. The percentage completed will determine the amount of investment for any given year. Section 16 contains the provisions of LB 1094. This allows hours worked by employees at their Nebraska home to be counted as time worked at the project location if an employee works from both locations. Section 17 contains some of the original provisions of LB 1150. They require applicants under the Imagine Act to provide the following information: the most recent taxable valuations and levy rates for all project locations, a program schedule of job training activities if credits are used for this purpose, and the city and state where an employee was previously located when recruited if the credits are used for talent recruitment. Section 18 has one cleanup provision. Section 19 clarifies the withholding credit calculation when the taxpayer is using an employee leasing company or the taxpayer itself is an employee leasing company. Section 20 is a cleanup provision. Section 21 clarifies that if the applications are on a wait list, they retain the same application date as if they had been approved within the statutory requirements. And finally, the bill contains the emergency clause. I realize this is a lot of information, but I can assure you that there is no surprises hidden in here. This is primarily a cleanup and fixes to Imagine Act that we did not address last session. We do, however, need these clarifications going forward, and I would ask you to vote green on the amendment and the underlying bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. As the clerk stated, there's a amendment to the committee amendment.
Mr. President, Senator McAllister would offer AM 2236.
Senator McCollister, you're welcome to open on AM 2236.
Thank you, Mr. President. Adoption of 2236, AM 2236 would include LB 457 and LB 1150. I introduced LB 457 on behalf of the City of Omaha to help the city's budget for local option sales tax refunds. Under economic incentive programs, companies may claim both state and local sales tax credits. When a company decides to ask for these credits in the form of refunds, cities do not have enough time to budget for them. AM 2236 would continue the practice of notifying cities when refunds are over $1,500. The amendment would also allow cities of Lincoln and Omaha to have a one-year cushion in order to budget and therefore pay for their local sales tax refunds over the course of 1 year if those refunds are over $1 million on an annual basis. Nebraska law already allows this type of protection for smaller cities and villages if more than 25% of their local option sales tax refunded in a prior year. I believe that we should offer this same type of protection to our larger cities. The amendment also clarifies language with the extent of removing the fiscal note initially prepared for LB 457. Omaha city officials tell me they do their best to budget for these refunds. However, the exact amounts can fluctuate widely and leave the city facing budget deficits if too much of their local sales tax revenue refund is in a given year. AM 2236 would be helpful to cities, and thus I would urge your green vote on the adoption of 2236 to LB 1150. By the way, this is a friendly amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McCollister. Debate is now open on AM 2236. Senator Erdman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. That is a lot of information that Senator Linehan shared about the Imagine Act. Know who to ask this question to. Maybe I should ask Senator Linehan a question or two if she would yield.
Senator Linehan, will you yield?
Certainly.
Senator Linehan, how in the world did we even get this far with the Imagine Act, with all the adjustments and reporting and things that we have to do in these bills? How did the Imagine Act even get off the ground?
Well, I think anytime you have something new, my life experience has been when you do something new, as you start, you find hiccups that you go back and fix, and that's what this represents.
Okay. It is very peculiar. I read through that this afternoon while we were, whatever. Okay. But there were 3 or 4 people in this body that voted no on 1107 last year, which included the Imagine Act, or 2 years ago, whenever it was. I can't understand how we would put a tax incentive program in place and not have any of this information that you're presenting to us tonight even closely being adopted, so that whoever applies, we could trace what they're doing and who their employees are and all of the things that you've said your amendments and your bill is going to do. That is amazing. So let me ask you this last question. So this provision allows for a direct deduction of the sales tax when a qualified Imagine Act person or company buys something. Is that correct? Actually,
I think, and it is late, and I let my staff go home, so I'm hoping this is right. It lets the data centers that are under Nebraska Advantage use the same system that we put in place in Nebraska Imagine. So it is a change. We used to, and that's why these are good questions, because it's why you're going to look at the fiscal note and go, oh, what is this?
Can you speak into the mic a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry. So you're going to look at the fiscal note and it's going to say it costs money when it really does not, because this is money we collect and then we give it back.
Correct.
So in the Imagine Act, we don't do that. We don't collect it and give it back. We just don't have them pay it in the first place. Saves a lot of book work.
I thought I seen where they could do either. Is that not true? They
Well,
only
they
have one
probably
option?
could do either, but in this, and this is actually Senator Flood's bill.
Okay.
But, so there's 5 bills in here. So Senator Flood's bill, said the data centers that
Okay.
are under Nebraska Advantage don't have to pay it in so we can pay it back. They
Okay.
just don't pay it.
This next question may be unfair to ask you, but Senator McCollister wants to make sure we notify these cities, the 2 larger cities, how much money is going to be withheld. If the state doesn't collect that and they just write it off when they buy something, how will you notify the city how much is written off?
I think, and I'm a little confused, and I'm going to support it tonight, but I'm going to look at it between now and select on Senator McCollister's amendment. I think what he is saying, in the littler communities that don't have quite so much wiggle room, if they get a big bill that they've got to turn back, then the sales tax revenue,
Okay.
they have a little space, a little running room.
Okay.
We don't evidently provide that to Omaha and Lincoln, but I am going to study this before we
Okay.
get to select.
Maybe I could ask Senator McCollister a question. Senator McCollister, you yield?
1 minute. Senator McCollister, will you yield?
Yes, I will.
Can you explain the question I just asked?
If I heard the question correctly, you were asking why the city of Omaha and city of Lincoln don't have the same rights and
No.
opportunities.
No, that's not the question. The
Sorry.
question is, if those local, when they go to buy something locally and they don't pay the sales tax, they just write it off, the sales tax right there, how will the city know how much has been withheld that they don't get? Because your amendment says that they will notify and give the city a year in advance to make up the difference of what they've lost. And if they don't ever collect the sales tax, how are they going to know how much they wrote off?
Well, the cities do figure out what those refunds are. This is for incremental payments or the incentive program payments. And so, they determine what that amount is. They notify the state and they'll delay it 1 year.
Okay.
And
Is
so
there,
that way they can budget for it.
Time, senators.
thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman, Lenahan, and McCollister. Senator Coulterman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Erdman, I understand your concern. And really, when we passed 1107, we put into statute that we would give the smaller communities an opportunity to delay because we're always running a year behind in their sales tax refunds. So we're giving them a heads up and a year ahead to so that they can budget for that. And then what Senator McCollister's amendment will do, it will do the same thing for Lincoln and Omaha that we've done for the rest of the state. So it's just really a cleanup and putting them on the same level as the rest of the state, the class 1 and class 2 communities. But what I wanted to talk about was the fact that, as an example, in 2020, the bill that I have in here, when the legislature was debating the provisions of the Nebraska Imagine Act, the legislature crafted language stating that a business could not manipulate the system by laying off employees to qualify for the incentives at a lower level. Well, over the interim, what we discovered was Senator Walz and I were contacted by a manufacturer up in the Omaha area who temporarily ramped up during the pandemic to respond to the needs of the state and the nation, actually. So they went out and they hired a bunch of new people to create personal protection equipment. It's a nationally known company, and they produce those much needed items in order to protect our citizens. And hopefully that was a once in a lifetime event. Well, then they laid those people off, and now they're going to expand their business and they want to come back. What we're trying to do is not cause them hardship because they did what was right. And so we've cleaned that language up. But I think what Senator McCollister is doing is really just bringing Lincoln and Omaha on the same level playing field that the rest of the state is enjoying. And what my particular bill and Senator Flood's bills do, they just clean up the language that we missed when we passed the Imagine Nebraska Act. So I'd entertain any more questions you might have, but I think that should clarify it for you, Senator Erdman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Coulterman. Senator Flood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, members. Senator Erdman, thank you for your questions. I did introduce a bill that was included in the committee amendment that we are considering in AM 2009. This effort came from, and there's a lot of this in Sarpy County, to be honest. There are data centers. What we did here is we reduced this to only the class tier 2 and tier 6 data centers. And before, what was happening, as you have aptly heard from Senator Linehan, the data center that was the recipient of our Nebraska Advantage program was paying into the Department of Revenue, and then that money was distributed to the cities, and then it was clawed back. So imagine being the Papillion city clerk, and you're getting this money through your sales tax collections, and then all of a sudden they claw back X million dollars. And it was really a pain for the payor of the tax to have it sit out there for so long. And then the city clerk suddenly was trying to deal with this, and this has been an ongoing issue. And so what this bill does, it essentially says you pay it to the Department of Revenue, they hold it, and they give it back to the taxpayer, and the city doesn't end up in this yin-yang of a situation where they're receiving funds and then they're essentially clawed back. And at the end of the day, the Revenue Committee has spent a considerable amount of time on this. We believe it's reasonable. We're not changing anything in the big picture. We are changing the logistics. And we heard from a lot of folks in Sarpy County that came to us and talked about it. And I sat down at length with the Nebraska League of Municipalities, Mayor Black, Mayor Kindig. We're both involved in this discussion, and I'm pleased that it is accurately reflected in the language that the Revenue Committee forwarded. So I'd urge its adoption. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Flood. Senator Erdman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Coleman, I appreciate your explanation in the form of some information several years ago when Cabela's was still in Sydney. They were a recipient of the Nebraska Advantage Act, and in a 4-year period, they took $8 million from the city of Sydney, which was 3 years' budget. Without notice, they just took it. And I appreciate if the Imagine Act has a trigger in there that says, we'll notify you and give you some advance notice. So I can appreciate that. I still have trouble figuring out why, well, I don't have trouble figuring out. I know why we give all these incentives, because their taxes are too high and we're trying to recruit businesses here. And if we don't do that, we don't have anybody come. So I understand that. But I see in the committee statement on several of those bills, there was opposition, mostly from the Nebraska Chamber and the Greater Chamber of Omaha and Lincoln. Maybe I could ask Senator Linehan what their opposition was and if you have settled that with them. Will you yield to a question?
Senator Linehan, will you yield?
The committee, are you looking at the audit committee statement?
Yeah.
Okay. So actually, that would be a better question to Chairman Geist.
Okay. Chairman Geist, will you yield?
Senator Geist, will you yield?
I will.
Senator Geist, what was the opposition by those testifiers that came in opposed to what you're trying to do?
The opposition was the amount of data that was being asked of the companies that are being given incentives when no data has yet been collected. So the audit committee is looking for specific data so they can do a good audit in 5 years, because they're required by statute to do 5-year data. Okay. Since no data has yet been returned to the Department of Revenue, there's just disagreement on how much is actually going to be able to be retrieved. So what we did is we included the points that we knew weren't being retrieved and then are waiting to check when the first returns are returned this summer and fall, to have the audit committee look at what is actually returned and then compare that with what they need.
Okay. Was one of their pushbacks a fact you're collecting social security numbers and that kind of personal information?
Yes, yes, it was some detailed information that is proprietary and private, though I'll also say on the record that the audit agency never publicizes anything. It's held private within the agency, and it's aggregated before it's published so that it would not be able to be discerned individually.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. You know, I happen to serve on the Building and Maintenance Committee, and it's the only special committee that doesn't get a priority bill. So, Senator Brandt, next year, when we amend the rules, I think we should include our committee to get a priority bill. What do you think? That'd be a good idea. So, thank you for the clarification. I'm still, at this point, I'm not impressed at all with the Imagine Act. I'm very disappointed that we approved it, but we did.
1
And
minute.
so maybe I'll have to vote for this to fix what we started. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator McCollister, you're welcome to close on AM 2236. Senator McCollister waives closing. Colleagues, the question before us is the advancement of AM 2236. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, Mr. Clerk.
33 ayes, no nays on the adoption of Senator McCollister's amendment.
AM 2236 is adopted. Additional amendments, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. President, Senator Matt Hansen had offered FA 188 to the committee amendments, but I have a note he wishes to withdraw.
It is withdrawn.
In that case, I have nothing further pending to the committee amendment.
Seeing no one in the queue, colleagues, the question is the adoption of AM 2000, or Senator Linehan, you're welcome to close. Senator Linehan waives closing on AM 2009. Colleagues, the question is the adoption of 2009. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, Mr. Clerk.
34 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the amendment.
AM 2009 is adopted. Seeing no one in the queue, Senator Geist, you're welcome to close on 1150. Senator Geist waives closing. Colleagues, the question is the advancement to ENR initial of LB 1150. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, Mr. Clerk.
35 ayes, no nays on the advancement of the bill.
LB 1150 advances. Next item, Mr. Clerk, LB 1150A.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 1150A by Senator Geist. It's a bill for enacting appropriations to appropriate funds to carry out the provisions of Legislative Bill 1150.
Senator Geist, you're welcome to open on LB 1150A.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll make this brief. This bill would fund the one-time expense to cover a programming cost to OCIO. The one-time programming cost would make a small update to 1107N Imagine Act database. I urge you to vote green on 1150A.
Thank you, Senator Geist. Debate is LB 1150A. See no one in the queue. Senator Geist, you're welcome to close. Senator Geist waives closing. Colleagues, the question is the adoption of LB 1150A to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, Mr. Clerk.
33 ayes, no nays on the motion to advance the bill.
LB 1150A is advanced.
Mr. President, next bill. Wait till I talk to the speaker. I'm sorry. Hold on. We're okay. Turn the mic off.
Mr. Clerk for items.
Thank you, Mr. President. Amendments to be printed, Senator Flood to 843, Senator Matt Hansen to 686. And finally, priority motion, Senator DeBoer would move to adjourn until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Colleagues, you've all heard the motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.
O'clock tomorrow morning.
Colleagues, you've all heard the motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.